Welcome. Today is the 8th day of Av, and here in Israel we'll be starting the 9th of Av in a few hours. It is also the 12th of August. Sorry, I had to put my microphone back on. We're looking at the second reading of Parshat Va'etchanan. So in the second reading, Moses starts off with the following declaration. Behold, as God has commanded me, I have taught you rules and ordinances to abide by in the land that you are entering in order to possess. You must safeguard these rules and ordinances and perform them, for that is your wisdom and your understanding, and the eyes of the people who will hear all these rules and say, only this great nation is such a wise and understanding people. Okay, so I'm not too crazy about the translation. I think it was a little cumbersome. What is he saying? He's saying that by keeping and performing these mitzvot, these commandments that God has given you, they will become your wisdom and your intelligence before the nations. What he means to say is that even though we have this tendency to think that Jews are the highest percentage of Nobel Prize winners or any other kind of endeavor, be it financial or political, whatever it is, that in truth the real achievement of the Jewish people is in keeping the Torah and its commandments. And when you think about science, for instance, so you know that science is going to change. So even though there may be periods in which Jews can contribute more because we enjoy more freedom, there may be periods when we won't be able to. The same is true with politics, the same is true with culture. All these things, there's ups and downs. But the true contribution of the Jewish people to humanity has always been the safeguarding of the Torah. And this is something that can't be dismissed in any way, because for 3,300 years we've been dedicated to this text. And we've developed everything we've developed from it. So even when you talk about Jews contributing to science or to literature, whatever it might be, in the end, everybody understands that what sets us aside and what allowed people to contribute in this direction was the unique culture that was developed around the Torah. And it's not just commitment to the text in the sense of preserving the text, but it's also commitment to the text in the sense of keeping it and safeguarding the commandments. And this creates a commitment that is unheard of in human history. There's no other text in the world that people have been committed to the same way, albeit with obvious changes over the generations because the circumstances of life have changed. There's no other text that people have been so committed to keeping for so many millennia. In general, I don't think that we usually even consider any of the nations in the world today to be as old as the Jewish people. The only ones that are maybe some kind of exception are the Chinese, but I tend to think that it has more to do with there being a very certain type of culture, but not a religion. It's not related in China to religion. So the question then becomes, what does it mean that this will be in the eyes of the nations of the world? The nations are not too impressed by Torah, even though, again, I talked about the uniqueness. But since the Torah, at least most people who are not Jewish don't think that it's so relevant for them, so they don't think about it as, you preserved something for us. So here we have to get into a number of explanations regarding what this verse means. There's really, in the sages, we find two different types of explanation about what it means. The one hand is, or the one idea is, that it's talking exactly about Torah. But there's another explanation that the sages already gave, which is that this is talking about understanding of nature. That it's not talking specifically, it's not talking about in general about the entire Torah. Rather, it's talking about the setting up of the Jewish calendar. And the Jewish calendar has a number of, one might say, tricks in it that are not simple at all. And they have to do with aligning the calendar so that it fits both the lunar and the solar years. But it's not just that. It has a few other ideas in it which kept it relevant for 1,500 years. Now, granted that as time goes on, I want to explain this. You really can't do a calendar that aligns the lunar and solar years with one another without periodically changing it. You can't do it. It doesn't work, because the Earth, the Moon, and the Sun are a three-body problem, and you have to retweak the calendar every 100 years or so. Otherwise it won't work. You can't calculate it in advance. If you only want to do the solar, you can do that. You can calculate it for as many years in advance as you like. The same is true of the lunar. But to get both of them aligned together, that every 100 or so years you have to retweak the calendar. So there's a number of tricks that the sages who built the calendar 1,500 years ago did in order to ensure that it would last as long as possible. So in principle, the calendar is still relevant. We don't celebrate Passover in the summer yet, or in the winter. We still celebrate it in the spring. It still comes out in the spring, and that's the main thing, that Passover has to be in the spring. But you have to know that it's falling off of alignment. It's impossible that it not. And when you study it in depth, what the sages who built this calendar did, you see that 1,500 years ago they were using techniques that are almost boggling to the mind today. Like, how could anybody have figured this out back then? Where did they have the astronomical observations from? And how exactly did they put it together so that it will last this long? And again, in principle, it's still relevant, but like I said, it's impossible to make it for posterity. You have to, at some point, realign it. So there are sages who say that what this means is that the calendar that we use and all the tricks and bells and whistles in it are an amazement in the eyes of the nations. And the general idea, though, is that even though we're not a nation of scientists, when it comes to keeping a commandment of God, we learn science. So you learn it at the highest possible level so that things work the way they should. When we think about these two interpretations, one is that we're talking about the Torah, and the other one is that we're talking about the science in Torah, then we come up with a very interesting connection between what we call the fourth revolution in Torah learning and the need to unify, to integrate Torah and science together. And these are the two big, one would say, the two big challenges that our generation has. On the one hand, to open up Torah learning to anybody who's sincere and wants to learn, which is not an easy thing in and of itself, I'm telling you. There's a lot of opposition to it, and there's a lot of brow raising, and how exactly can this be permitted? Because if you remember, the last time that the Torah was opened up this way was done by people who didn't receive a sanction to do so. And the result was Christianity, which is a very, very complex and difficult topic to address, because some of the things that were revealed did a lot of good for the world, but many of these things, the way that they were revealed, the way they were used, became a two-edged sword for the Jewish people. And so it's a very complex topic. How do you open up study of the Torah in such a way that it doesn't lead in the end to hatred of the source? There's a statement from the sages, which is at first sounds almost preposterous, but we know from history that it's been the case that converts are difficult to the Jewish people like a growth. Why do they say this? They say this because when somebody comes from the outside, they expect everything to be pristine and pure, and they can't stand any kind of what they consider to be deviation from that purity. And so if they look at the way that we do things, they may not understand at first why we do them the way we do them. More importantly, why we don't rebuke everyone who doesn't do it the right way. Why don't we as Jews enforce the way that the Torah should be kept? And then the convert comes and says, but this is wrong, you're not doing it the right way. And it becomes like a growth that is attacking the host. And it doesn't happen obviously to all converts, and because a convert usually comes from a place of humility. But after they're in the Judaism for an amount of time, that can happen. And so there's this fear that when you open things up, and people can now assume the same truths, the same actions, the same customs, they come to the source and they say, but the source is off. And to a large degree, that's what happened with Christianity. That even though all the ideas originate from Judaism, and, well, we can leave Christianity alone because it's changed over the generations, because it connected to Judaism in a stronger way. But when we look at Islam, there you see it in full force. I don't know who taught Muhammad Judaism, but whoever taught him did a tremendous disservice to the Jewish people, because he took the ideas and not only did he change them, but he then, in order to legitimize the changes he made, he claimed that the Jews had forged the Torah over the generations. So nothing so easily good comes out of this opening. It's a very delicate and difficult topic to undertake, and yet Rav Ginsburg at least feels that in this generation, if we don't do that, then we're missing the challenge of our generation. On the other side is the need to integrate Torah with science, because when you look at it, it's very nice that we've been so committed to Torah, but in the modern world, is the Torah really an answer to the problems that we have? The answer can only come if you integrate Torah with science. I don't mean science just physical sciences, the exact sciences. I mean political science, I mean economics, literature, whatever endeavor human beings are in, and especially when we're talking about the social sciences. There's so many answers to the different problems that humanity is facing now, but in order to translate them from the language of the Torah into a language that modern people can understand, you really have to integrate the two. You have to find a common ground, a common language, that the ideas can be transported from one side to the other. And by the way, it works in the other direction. There are a lot of new ideas in science that have been developed over the last 2,000 years, or let's say 1,500 years, which need to find their way into the way that Torah is learned. That is an even harder sell for many Jews, to integrate modes of thought that are not natural to the Talmud, because we've learned something about thought, we've learned something about psychology, we've learned something about many things that need to also be integrated. So really this verse, that it will be your wisdom and your intelligence before the nations, and its two interpretations, that it's talking both about Torah and about science, is actually a source for combining these two revolutions together. The revolution of teaching Torah to the entire world and the revolution of integrating Torah and science together. Thanks for joining today. I wish everyone who's fasting that this be the last fast, meaning that we don't even get to it somehow. I know that it sounds kind of far-fetched. How can this happen? But there's a custom that on the Shabbat before Tisha B'Av, the Shabbat before the 9th day of Av, every person is shown a vision of the third temple. And if you think about it long and hard enough, something comes. And what came to me this Shabbat convinced me that it's certainly possible that the temple will come down from the heavens instantaneously, all at once, in a way that would be very surprising. It would fit all the descriptions that it's something miraculous, and yet be something entirely rational and scientific even. I can't share the vision because we don't have enough time, maybe some other time. And I very much hope that tonight or in the last hours that are left until tonight, we'll see this vision, or some other vision, some other competing vision, might be even better, happening, and that the world come to the place that it needs to come to, and that we all shift in our consciousness in such a way that conflict is gone, and that goodwill be the currency of society, and that is what people will cling to and work for, and that will merit, therefore, to see the full and complete redemption. Thanks for joining today. I will hopefully see you on Wednesday. Tomorrow, probably not.
Bye-bye.